My hands trembled so hard that the intake forms slipped from my fingers, scattering across the pristine lobby floor. Margaret Anderson. The nurse called my name again, her voice echoing through the sterile waiting room. I looked up at my daughter-in-law Jessica, who wouldn't meet my eyes. The brochure she'd shown me said Golden Years Wellness Center with pictures of smiling seniors playing cards and doing water aerobics, but the sign above the reception desk read Evergreen Memory Care Facility, Long-Term Residential Services. That's when I realized my own son and his wife were trying to dump me in a nursing home without even telling me. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The nurse smiled sympathetically, clipboard in hand. No mistake, Mrs. Anderson. Your room is all prepared. Your daughter-in-law pre-registered you last week. Jessica was suddenly very interested in her phone, scrolling frantically, avoiding the devastation on my face. The diamond tennis bracelet I'd given her for her birthday last month glinted on her wrist as she typed, the one that cost me $3,200 from my late husband's insurance money. Jessica, I managed to say, what is this place? She finally looked up, her face a careful mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. It's for the best, Margaret. After your little episodes, we've discussed this, but we hadn't, not once. I remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, April 16th. I was making my signature blueberry muffins in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd raised my son Michael, the same house I'd owned for 43 years. Jessica had called the night before, unusually solicitous. We're worried about you, Margaret. Michael thinks we should take you for a checkup. I'll pick you up tomorrow at 10. I'd been confused. I had my annual physical just a month earlier with Dr. Winters, who'd said I was remarkably healthy for 68. But I agreed because that's what mothers do. We trust our children. I even dressed nicely. My pale blue cardigan that Michael always complimented, pearl earrings Robert had given me on our 30th anniversary. I wanted to look put together, to ease their apparent concerns. I wrote down the appointment details in my planner, right next to my book club meeting and my volunteer shift at the library. Hardly the actions of someone with memory issues. Wouldn't you agree? Those muffins I baked that morning, I left them on the counter with a note for Jessica and Michael to take home. That's how confident I was that I'd be returning to my house that afternoon. I even set the timer on my sprinkler system for the rose bushes Robert and I had planted together 20 years earlier. Would someone with episodes remember to do that? The smell of those muffins, cinnamon, and blueberries lingered on my clothes as Jessica drove me farther and farther from my neighborhood, past the medical center where all my doctors practiced, out toward the edge of town. Isn't Dr. Mitchell's office downtown? I'd asked innocently. Jessica had just adjusted her designer sunglasses and said, we're trying someone new, a specialist. Michael and I think it's for the best. I still have the container I packed those muffins in. Empty now, of course. They ate my offerings while plotting to discard me. Robert and I bought our house on Maple Street in 1978, just before Michael was born. We paid $67,000, a fortune to us then. Robert worked at Anderson Manufacturing, no relation, just a coincidence, for 37 years. I taught third grade at Lincoln Elementary until I retired in 2012. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Robert always said, save for a rainy day, Maggie, so we did. When he passed away from heart failure 5 years ago, he left me with no mortgage, a modest pension, and $175,000 in life insurance. I thought I was set for my golden years in the home we'd built together. The day after the funeral, Michael and Jessica brought dinner. You don't need to rattle around in this big house alone, Mom, Michael had said, his arm around Jessica. We've been looking at some nice condos near us. I thanked them but declined. This was my home, filled with memories in every corner. The height marks on the kitchen doorframe where I'd measured Michael's growth. The den where Robert and I would read together every evening. The garden where my roses had won the Neighborhood Association Award 3 years running. How could I leave all that? Michael was always a good boy, sensitive, a bit too eager to please, but kind-hearted. He met Jessica at college. She was studying business while he pursued engineering. I remember their wedding day so clearly. June 12, 2005. I spent $22,000 on that wedding, nearly all of my personal savings. Jessica had expensive taste. Vera Wang dress, top shelf open bar, lobster dinner for 200 guests. I didn't mind. I wanted my only child to have a beautiful day. Robert whispered to me during the reception. I hope she's worth it, Maggie, I shushed him. But sometimes I wonder if he saw something in her that I missed. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she called me Mom. The subtle dismissal in her tone when I offered family recipes or advice. The calculating look when she first walked through our house, assessing its value rather than its warmth. Things changed after Robert died. Michael started visiting less. When they did come over, Jessica would open my cupboards, checking expiration dates on food. She'd casually mention friends whose parents were struggling living alone. She'd pick up my prescription bottles and frown. Are you taking these regularly, Margaret? She'd ask, though I've never missed a dose in my life. I have a pill organizer I fill every Sunday evening. Blue for morning meds, yellow for evening. I even keep a medication log in a notebook by the coffee maker. Date, time, medication. Every single day. Would someone with dementia maintain such meticulous records? I'll tell you exactly what medications I take and the precise dosages when we get to what happened at the facility. I noticed Jessica started taking photos when she visited. Just capturing memories, she'd say, but I'd catch her photographing the stack of mail on my counter, the inside of my refrigerator, the bathroom medicine cabinet. Once, I found her in my home office, going through my financial documents. Just helping you organize, she claimed, though I've kept immaculate records for decades. My checking account register balanced to the penny, my tax returns filed on time every year since 1975, neatly labeled in manila folders. But suddenly, according to Jessica, I was getting confused about bills. I caught her taking pictures of my bank statements on February 23rd. I remember because it was my friend Eleanor's birthday, and I'd just written her card when Jessica and Michael surprised me with a visit. You might be wondering about my relationship with my son during all this. Michael works long hours at his engineering firm. At least, that's what Jessica always told me when I asked why he called less and less. When he did visit, Jessica did most of the talking. Michael's concerned about you, Margaret. Michael thinks you should consider assisted living. Michael noticed you repeated that story about your garden club. Always, Michael's concerns filtered through her. When I'd look at my son's face, I'd see discomfort, but he never contradicted her. The little boy who once cried when he accidentally stepped on an ant colony, who made me promise to never put him in a home like Grandma Weber. Was he really behind this? Or was he, too, being manipulated by the woman who had gradually isolated him from his family and friends? I'll show you exactly how I confirmed the truth later. I should have seen the warning signs. Last Christmas, instead of our traditional dinner at my house, Jessica insisted they host. It's too much work for you now, Margaret, she said, though I'd been preparing holiday meals for 45 years. When I arrived, carrying my signature pecan pie, the one Michael always requested with extra pecans, Mom, Jessica took it with a tight smile and placed it in the kitchen. We never ate it. Instead, she served a store-bought pumpkin pie because Michael's watching his sugar intake now. Later, I overheard her in the hallway on the phone. No, she's fine, right? Now, just a little confused about the date earlier. Yes, we're still meeting with the lawyer next week about the power of attorney. I pretended not to hear, my heart pounding. Who is she talking to? What lawyer? I never mentioned this to Michael. Perhaps that was my mistake. In February, Jessica suggested I update my will. She recommended a lawyer, her sorority sister Diane. I agreed to a consultation, thinking it was sensible financial planning. But when I arrived at Diane's office on February 15th, the documents prepared weren't just about my will. There was a durable power of attorney giving Michael or his designee control over my medical and financial decisions. There was paperwork for transfer of property deed for my house. When I questioned these, Diane exchanged a look with Jessica. Margaret, we discussed this, Jessica said smoothly. For asset protection, in case you need long-term care. I didn't sign anything that day. I said I needed time to review with my own lawyer, Eleanor's son James, who'd known me since he was a child. Jessica was visibly annoyed. We're just trying to help you avoid probate, she insisted. But I knew what probate was. Robert and I had already set up a simple trust years ago. What they wanted was control. Immediate, not after my death. After that meeting, Jessica intensified her campaign. Suddenly, Michael was finding things around my house that concerned him. A pot allegedly left on the stove. I haven't forgotten to turn off a burner in my life. Mail supposedly unopened. I pay every bill the day it arrives. A confusion about what day it was. I'd simply misspoken, saying Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Each incident was documented with a date and photo in a notebook Jessica kept. March 3rd, found expired milk in refrigerator. March 17th, wearing mismatched shoes. April 2nd, called Michael by his father's name. Some were outright fabrications. Others were innocent mistakes any person might make, framed as evidence of decline. The expired milk was a brand new gallon I'd just purchased. Jessica had checked the wrong date. The mismatched shoes were my gardening clogs by the back door, not what I was wearing. And I've called Michael by his father's name occasionally since he was a teenager. They look so similar, it's sometimes uncanny. I started keeping my own log after the lawyer incident. A small notebook hidden in my knitting basket where I recorded each visit and what was said. Noted how Jessica would move things in my house, then express concern when I couldn't find them, how she'd ask me the same questions repeatedly, as if testing me, then share worried glances with Michael when I showed the slightest hesitation. I documented the time she helped me organize my medications and several of my pills mysteriously vanished. April 5th, Jessica reorganized my bathroom cabinet, claimed my blood pressure medication was expired and threw it away. I had to call Dr. Winters for an emergency refill. April 9th, Jessica moved my car keys from their hook by the door to a kitchen drawer, then pointed out to Michael that I was losing things. April 14th, Jessica turned up the thermostat to 78 degrees, then commented on how I must be confused about temperature regulation. Small things, but they formed a pattern that was becoming increasingly clear to me. The breaking point came on April 10th, when I discovered Jessica had contacted my neighbors. Barbara from next door called, concerned. Jessica mentioned you'd had a few falls recently. Do you need help installing grab bars? I was stunned. I hadn't fallen once. When I confronted Jessica by phone, she was unruffled, just being proactive. Margaret, prevention is important at your age. My age, I'm 68, not 98. I walk 2 miles every morning. I do yoga with Eleanor twice a week at the community center. The only time I've been hospitalized in the past decade was for a planned knee replacement in 2018, from which I recovered ahead of schedule. My doctor says I have the bone density of someone 20 years younger, thanks to my lifetime of activity. But suddenly, according to Jessica's whisper campaign, I was frail, confused, and prone to accidents. I started to wonder what else she might be saying behind my back, to my friends, to my doctor, to social services. Was she building a case to have me declared incompetent? The thought kept me awake at night. I'd lie in bed, listening to the familiar creaks of my beloved home, wondering how many more nights I'd spend there. I began to feel paranoid, checking and rechecking that I'd turned off appliances, keeping meticulous notes of every conversation, taking photos of my organized home before their visits. I'd always been independent, confident. Now I was second-guessing myself. Is this what they wanted? To make me doubt my own mind until I agreed to whatever they proposed. I started to feel like I was in one of those psychological thrillers where no one believes the protagonist. Except this wasn't a movie. This was my life. The night before Jessica came to take me to what I thought was a doctor's appointment, I called my old friend Eleanor. We've been friends since our children were in preschool together, minus 42 years of friendship. Something doesn't feel right about this specialist appointment, I confided. Eleanor's husband had suffered from Alzheimer's before his death, so she knew the signs of genuine cognitive decline. You're sharp as a tack, Margaret, she assured me. Sharper than me, and no one's trying to put me in a home. At her suggestion, I gathered some important documents, my ID, insurance cards, a copy of my advance directive that named my brother Thomas as my healthcare proxy, not Michael. I tucked them into my purse, along with Eleanor's phone number and her son James's business card. He's an elder law attorney in Madison. Just in case, Eleanor had said. Thank God for her foresight. I should also mention, I slipped my cell phone charger into my cardigan pocket, another decision that would prove crucial. The morning Jessica arrived to pick me up, she seemed oddly nervous, checking her watch repeatedly, texting someone Michael, I presumed. We should get going, she said, barely touching the coffee I'd offered. The appointment's at 11, and there might be paperwork. I asked innocent questions during the drive. What was this doctor's specialty? Had Michael already met with them? Jessica's answers were vague. It's a comprehensive evaluation center, very highly regarded. They can run all the tests in one place. We drove for nearly an hour, leaving our suburb of Lakeside and heading toward the rural outskirts of Pine Valley. The facility was set back from the road, surrounded by manicured lawns and gardens that might have been beautiful if they weren't so clearly designed to keep people in, not out. An 8-foot decorative iron fence encircled the property. The sign at the gated entrance read, Evergreen Care Communities. No mention of the wellness center from Jessica's brochure. Jessica parked in the visitor lot rather than the patient drop-off. The first odd detail I noted. She grabbed a small overnight bag from her trunk, one I hadn't noticed her packing. Just some toiletries and things, she said breezily when I questioned it. In case the evaluation runs long. We walked through automatic doors into a lobby that looked more like a hotel than a medical office. A reception desk, seating areas with magazines, landscape paintings on the walls, but there were other details. Keypads beside every door, nurses in scrubs, residents in wheelchairs, being guided by aides. An elderly man shuffled past in slippers and a robe, an aide gently redirecting him when he tried to exit. Harold, remember, we're going to the dining room, not outside, she said kindly but firmly. I felt a chill run through me. This wasn't a doctor's office or an evaluation center. This was a nursing home, and based on the secured doors and gentle redirections, it appeared to specialize in memory care. I glanced at Jessica, who was already approaching the reception desk with an envelope of documents. We have an intake appointment for Margaret Anderson, she said confidently. My mother-in-law. I believe everything's been pre-approved. The receptionist, her namatag read Cheryl, smiled and took the envelope. Yes, we've been expecting Mrs. Anderson. If you could both have a seat, the admissions nurse will be with you shortly. Admissions nurse, not evaluation specialist, not doctor admissions. I felt lightheaded suddenly, grateful for the nearby chair I sank into. Jessica sat beside me, scrolling through her phone, seemingly untroubled by the bombshell that had just been dropped. I watched residents being wheeled past. Some were alert, making eye contact and smiling. Others seemed lost in their own worlds. Many appeared significantly older and more impaired than me. Jessica, I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. This is a nursing home. She glanced up briefly from her phone. It's a continuing care community, Margaret. They have independent living, too. We just want to get a professional assessment. But her eyes slid away from mine too quickly. The brochure she'd shown me earlier, carefully selected pages about wellness evaluations, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she handed me a clipboard with admission forms, emergency contacts, medical history, medication list, and most disturbingly, a form titled Personal Property Inventory with sections for items the resident would keep versus items to be returned to family. I felt like I'd stepped into a nightmare, one where I was being erased piece by piece. That's when the admissions nurse called my name, Margaret Anderson. She stood by a door marked Residential Intake, clipboard in hand. I dropped the forms, papers scattering across the floor. In that moment of confusion, as Jessica bent to gather them, I did something instinctive. I reached into my purse and pressed my brother Thomas's number on my cell phone. He lived 2 hours away in Springfield, but we spoke weekly. As Jessica collected the fallen papers, I whispered into my phone, hidden in my purse, Tom, it's Maggie. I'm at Evergreen Care Facility near Pine Valley. Jessica brought me here saying it was a doctor's appointment. It's a nursing home. They're trying to admit me. I couldn't hear if he responded, but I left my purse unzipped, phone call running. If nothing else, it would record what happened next. Mrs. Anderson. The nurse prompted again, looking between me and Jessica with growing confusion. I stood slowly, my heart pounding. There must be some mistake, I managed to say. The nurse, Linda, according to her badge, consulted her clipboard. No mistake. We have your room prepared in our memory care wing. Your daughter-in-law completed the pre-registration process last week. Jessica was still gathering papers, unable to meet my eyes. The diamond tennis bracelet I'd given her for her birthday caught the light. $3,200 from Robert's life insurance money. A gift to the woman who was now trying to lock me away. Jessica, I said, my voice stronger now, fueled by indignation. What is this place? She finally looked up, her expression a practiced mask of concern. It's for the best, Margaret. After your episodes, we've discussed this, but we hadn't discussed anything. That was the first undeniable lie I could prove. There had never been a conversation about nursing home placement. I'd never agreed to an evaluation. I'd never signed any admissions paperwork. Whatever forms Jessica had provided to this facility had not been authorized by me. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes when the threat is no longer hidden but out in the open. Nurse Linda, I said clearly, making sure my voice would carry. To the phone still connected in my purse, I have not consented to admission here. I was told this was a doctor's appointment. I have not signed any paperwork authorizing my daughter-in-law to make decisions for me. I want to leave immediately. Linda's professional smile faltered. She looked at Jessica, who quickly intervened. Margaret gets confused and anxious in new situations, she said in a stage whisper, loud enough for me to hear. The geriatric specialist we consulted said this might happen during admission. Maybe we could speak privately. She moved to guide the nurse away from me, but I stood my ground. I am not confused, I stated firmly. I was deceived about where I was being taken today. I have no cognitive impairment. I manage my own finances, drive my own car, live independently, and volunteer twice weekly at the public library. I had my annual physical 4 weeks ago with Dr. Alan Winters at Lakeside Medical Group, who noted no cognitive concerns. You may call him at 555-7268-2402 verify. The specificity of my response clearly caught both Jessica and Nurse Linda off guard. This wasn't the reaction of a confused elderly woman. I continued, gaining confidence with each word. Furthermore, my healthcare proxy is my brother, Thomas Weber, not my son or daughter-in-law. Any medical decisions regarding my care must go through him, according to my advance directive, which was filed with my doctor and the Lakeside Hospital System in 2019. After my husband's death, I reached into my purse, intentionally angling it so they couldn't see the active phone call, and pulled out the copy of my advance directive. You'll find his contact information and my wishes clearly documented here. Jessica's face had gone pale. Margaret, you're making a scene, she hissed. We're trying to help you. The doctor said your paranoia would make this difficult. Another lie. What doctor? I'd never been diagnosed with paranoia or any other psychiatric condition. I'd never even taken an antidepressant. What Dr. Jessica? I challenged. Give Nurse Linda the name and contact information right now. Jessica fumbled. Dr. Reynolds, he evaluated your case. I turned to Linda. I've never met or been examined by any Dr. Reynolds. I've never authorized my medical records to be shared with this facility or any doctor outside my established healthcare team. If such records were provided, they were obtained fraudulently. By now, our interaction had drawn attention. A distinguished-looking man in a suit approached. The NAMA tag on his lapel identified him as Gregory Thomas, Executive Director. Is there a problem here? He inquired, his tone pleasant but authoritative. Before Jessica could speak, I addressed him directly. Mr. Thomas, I was brought here under false pretenses. I was told I was going to a doctor's appointment, not being admitted to a residential facility. I have not consented to admission, have not signed any paperwork, and wish to leave immediately. My daughter-in-law has misrepresented my cognitive status and does not have legal authority to make decisions on my behalf. Mr. Thomas's expression remained neutral, but I saw the slight narrowing of his eyes as he assessed the situation. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in my office, he suggested, gesturing toward a door marked Administration. Mrs. Anderson, would that be acceptable to you? I nodded, but added, I'd like to call my brother. First, he should be part of this discussion as my legal healthcare proxy. I reached for my phone, now ending the previous call that had hopefully captured the entire exchange. Jessica interjected quickly. That's not necessary. We can sort this out as a family. But Mr. Thomas held up a hand. Mrs. Anderson has the right to contact her healthcare proxy. We can use my office phone if you prefer. Mrs. Anderson. In Mr. Thomas's office, the power dynamic shifted. Behind his desk were framed credentials, licenses, certificates from geriatric care associations, ethics committee memberships. This was someone who understood regulations and patient rights. He reviewed the paperwork Jessica had submitted, then looked at my advance directive. This is concerning, he said finally. The pre-admission documentation indicates Mr. and Mrs. Michael Anderson have medical power of attorney, but But your advance directive names Thomas Weber. There's a significant discrepancy here. Jessica interjected. We've been in the process of updating her documents. Margaret agreed to transfer power of attorney last month. Another lie. I did not, I stated firmly. The only meeting about legal documents was with Jessica's friend, Diane, where I declined to sign anything because I wanted my own attorney to review it first. Mr. Thomas looked troubled. Mrs. Anderson, may I ask you a few questions? When I agreed, he proceeded with what I recognized as a basic cognitive assessment. The date. Wednesday, April 16, 2023. The current president. I answered correctly. My address. I recited it precisely, along with my phone number and social security number. Simple arithmetic. I calculated backwards from 100 by 7 south without hesitation. He asked me to recall 3 objects he named at the beginning of our conversation. I repeated them perfectly. Throughout this impromptu examination, Jessica's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable. This was not going according to her script. Mrs. Anderson, Mr. Thomas said after completing his assessment, you appear perfectly oriented and cognitively intact to me. Without proper legal documentation, and given the circumstances, I cannot in good conscience process your admission today. He turned to Jessica. Mrs. Anderson, this facility cannot accept a resident without proper consent and documentation. If there are genuine concerns about your mother-in-law's capacity, there are proper legal channels to address them, including geriatric evaluation by neutral parties and, if necessary, guardianship proceedings through the courts. But bringing someone to a facility under false pretenses is not appropriate. Jessica's carefully constructed facade cracked. You don't understand what we've been dealing with, she snapped. She hides her episodes from strangers. She's falling apart at home. Our lawyer said this was the simplest way to get her the care she needs. Mr. Thomas remained professional but firm. If that's the case, then the proper procedure would be a formal capacity evaluation, followed by legal proceedings if warranted. Admitting someone to memory care without their knowledge or consent, when they clearly have the capacity to make decisions, could constitute elder abuse. Those words, elder abuse, hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jessica's expression shifted from frustration to alarm. She hadn't expected to be the one under scrutiny. Mr. Thomas pressed a button on his desk phone. Cheryl, could you please come to my office and bring our patient rights packet? He turned back to us. Mrs. Anderson, the elder Mrs. Anderson, would you like to call your brother now? I believe we need to ensure you have proper support and transportation home. I nodded gratefully, reaching for the office phone. As I dialed Thomas's number, Jessica gathered her purse and stood abruptly. I need to call Michael. This isn't what we discussed with Diane. She left the office, phone already at her ear. Thomas answered on the second ring. Maggie, are you okay? I've been trying to call you back. His voice was tight with worry. I explained the situation briefly, aware of Mr. Thomas listening with increasing concern. I'll be there in 2 hours, my brother promised. Don't sign anything. Don't go anywhere with Jessica. After I hung up, Mr. Thomas spoke quietly. Mrs. Anderson, given what I'm hearing, I'd like to offer our social workers assistance. We take elder rights very seriously here, and what you're describing raises significant red flags about potential financial exploitation and emotional abuse. Cheryl arrived with the patient rights information, but also accompanied by a kind-faced woman who introduced herself as Denise Ramirez, Elder Services Coordinator. Mr. Thomas asked me to join you. I'm a licensed social worker specializing in elder protection, she explained. As I recounted the past few months, the concerning behaviors, the attempts to gain control of my finances, the isolation tactics, Denise took notes and occasionally asked clarifying questions. Her expression grew increasingly troubled. Have you documented any of these incidents? She asked. I nodded, describing my hidden notebook with dates, times, and specific actions. And Jessica doesn't know about this documentation. I shook my head. I keep it with my knitting supplies. She has no interest in those. Denise explained the resources available to me: adult protective services, legal aid for seniors, the elder abuse hotline. She provided her card with her direct number. What you're describing follows a classic pattern of isolation, gaslighting, and attempted financial exploitation. The fact that they brought you here under false pretenses is particularly concerning. Mr. Thomas added, we occasionally see family members who genuinely believe placement is necessary, but the approach taken here raises serious ethical and potentially legal concerns. As we spoke, I realized Jessica had been gone for some time. Cheryl knocked on the door again. Mr. Thomas, Mrs. Anderson, the younger Mrs. Anderson, appears to have left the premises. She asked me to inform her mother-in-law that she needs to figure out her own way home, since she's so independent. The pettiness of this final act, abandoning a senior citizen at a facility nearly an hour from home, seemed to shock even the professional staff. "I'll be happy to drive you home when your brother arrives, Mrs. Anderson," Denise offered immediately. "We can use that time to connect you with some resources." The next 2 hours in the facility were surreal. I was given a tour, not as a potential resident, but to understand what Jessica had planned for me. The memory care unit was secured with keypad entries. Residents there needed significant assistance. Some didn't recognize their own family members. Many needed help eating, dressing, using the bathroom. The monthly cost, $7,850 for basic care, with additional charges for specialized services. Jessica had selected a deluxe private suite at $9,200 per month. The math wasn't difficult. My home was worth approximately $410,000 in the current market. My savings and investments totaled about $163,000. My monthly income from Robert's pension and Social Security came to $3,245. The facility costs would have depleted my savings within 2 years, likely forcing the sale of my home. And who would have managed those assets during my incapacity? Michael and Jessica, with their newly created power of attorney. Thomas arrived, looking worried but determined. At 73, my older brother had always been my protector. From childhood playground bullies to the painful months after Robert's death, when he drove 2 hours each weekend to check on me. Seeing him walk through those doors, silver-haired and straight-backed, despite his arthritis, I felt tears of relief well up. "Maggie," he said, wrapping me in a hug that smelled of the same aftershave he'd used for decades. "Let's get you home." He listened intently as Mr. Thomas and Denise explained what had happened, his face growing stonier with each detail. "I want copies of any paperwork Jessica submitted," he requested, "and I'd like documentation of today's events from both of you, if possible. My sister may need this for legal protection." The drive home with Thomas and Denise was quiet at first. I felt drained, humiliated, but also intensely angry. "I should have seen this coming," I said. Finally, the signs were all there. Denise spoke gently from the back seat. "Elder exploitation often comes from those closest to us. Mrs. Anderson, the perpetrators count on trust and family loyalty to prevent victims from recognizing or reporting the abuse. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Thomas reached over to squeeze my hand. "Maggie, do you remember when Dad started failing and Aunt Gertrude tried to take over? You stood up to her then. We're going to stand up to Jessica and Michael." Now, arriving home, I felt a wave of emotion seeing my familiar porch, my garden just beginning to bloom with spring flowers. Thomas helped me inside while Denise followed with my purse. The house was exactly as I'd left it, the muffins still on the counter under a cake dome, the morning's coffee cup in the sink, my home, my sanctuary. The place Jessica and Michael had planned to take from me. I showed Thomas and Denise to the living room while I went to retrieve my hidden notebook from the knitting basket beside my reading chair. The detailed log of Jessica's manipulations filled nearly 30 pages, dates, actions, statements, all carefully recorded in my teacher's handwriting. Denise reviewed it with growing concern. "This is exactly the kind of documentation that helps build a case," she confirmed. "May I make copies before I leave?" Thomas insisted on staying with me that night. We called his wife Marjorie to explain the situation, and she immediately packed a bag to join us. The following day, as evening settled around us, my phone rang repeatedly. Michael, then Jessica, then Michael again. I didn't answer. Instead, I followed Denise's advice and called the local police non-emergency line to file a report documenting the day's events. "We don't know what they might claim," Denise had warned. "Creating a record now protects you." The officer who took my statement seemed concerned, particularly about the attempt to institutionalize me under false pretenses. "That's a serious matter, ma'am," he said. "We can document this as an attempted involuntary confinement situation. Would you like an officer to drive by your house periodically over the next few days?" I also called Eleanor, who arrived within 30 minutes, bearing a casserole and fierce indignation. I knew something wasn't right about that appointment, she fumed. I'm calling James tonight. He'll know exactly what legal steps to take. Eleanor's son James had specialized in elder law after watching his father's difficult journey with Alzheimer's. He'd seen firsthand how vulnerable seniors could be. Even with loving families, Eleanor hugged me tightly before leaving. You're staying with me tomorrow while Thomas and Marjorie go to your bank and doctor's office, she insisted. We're not leaving you alone until we're sure you're protected. That night, I slept poorly despite my brother's reassuring presence down the hall. Each time I drifted off, I'd jolt awake with the image of that locked memory care unit, the residents shuffling in slippers and institutional gowns. I kept thinking about how close I'd come to being one of them, not because of cognitive decline, but because someone wanted what was mine. Around 3 a.m., I heard the distinctive chime of a text message. Michael, finally responding directly, rather than through Jessica. Mom, you've really upset Jessica. She was just trying to get you the help you need. We need to talk about next steps. This can't continue. No apology, no acknowledgement of the deception. Just continued insistence that I was the problem. I showed Thomas the message in the morning. Classic manipulation, he said grimly. Let's not respond yet. James will advise us on communication going forward. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Marjorie arrived bearing breakfast and fierce protectiveness. James called to schedule an appointment for that afternoon. Thomas and I went to my bank where I removed Michael and Jessica from all accounts and safe deposit box access privileges I'd added after Robert's death, thinking it prudent to have family members who could help in an emergency. The bank manager, Mr. Phillips, looked concerned as I explained the situation. Unfortunately, we see this type of thing more often than you'd think. Mrs. Anderson, I'm going to put a fraud alert on your accounts as an extra precaution, and I'd recommend you check your credit report to ensure no accounts have been opened in your name without your knowledge. From there, we visited Dr. Winters, who was appalled by the situation. I just saw you last month, Margaret. There were absolutely no cognitive concerns. He performed another brief cognitive assessment, documenting perfect results in my medical record. I'm going to make a note that any requests for your medical information must come directly from you, with verification, he assured me, and I'll document that Thomas is your healthcare proxy according to your advance directive. If anyone claims otherwise, they'll need a court order, his nurse added. Dr. Winters has seen this before. Some families rush to assume incapacity when it's not warranted. Others actually induce confusion through medication manipulation or sleep deprivation to make their case stronger. The thought that Jessica might have been doing exactly that, perhaps when she organized my medications, sent a chill through me. The meeting with James Weber that afternoon was both reassuring and sobering. Eleanor's son had grown from the gangly teenager who mowed my lawn into a distinguished attorney with silver temples and reading glasses. What Jessica and Michael attempted constitutes elder abuse under state law, he stated firmly after reviewing my notebook, the facility documentation, and the timeline of events. Attempted involuntary confinement, financial exploitation, misrepresentation to medical providers. These are serious matters. We have several immediate steps to take. He outlined a protection plan, revocation of any powers previously granted to Michael or Jessica, new estate planning documents clearly excluding them from decision-making roles, a cease and desist letter regarding false statements about my capacity, and potential restraining orders if necessary. What about my son? I asked, the question that had been haunting me. Is Michael a victim of Jessica's manipulation, or is he an active participant? James's expression softened slightly. That's harder to determine legally. People can be both perpetrators and victims in these situations. Coercive control works on spouses as well as parents. But regardless of his level of culpability, we need to protect you first. Once you're secure, there may be opportunities to understand his role more clearly. He drafted legal documents on the spot, a formal revocation of any existing powers of attorney, a letter demanding the return of any documents or statements made in my name, and a new, advanced directive reinforcing Thomas's role as my healthcare proxy. That evening, the doorbell rang. Michael stood on my porch alone, looking uncomfortable. Thomas answered, positioning himself protectively in the doorway. I want to talk to Mom, Michael said, his voice carrying to where I sat in the living room. Alone. Thomas didn't budge. That's not happening today, Michael. Not after what you and Jessica pulled. My son's face flushed. You don't understand. Mom needs help. She's been slipping for months. Jessica has documented everything. Thomas's response was measured but firm. We've reviewed Jessica's documentation with Margaret's doctor, her bank, and an elder law attorney today. The consensus is that what you two attempted constitutes elder abuse. If you want to communicate with your mother, it will need to be through her attorney for now. I couldn't help myself. I moved to the doorway, needing to see my son's face, to understand if he was villain or victim in this scenario. Michael, I said softly, how could you? That place, did you even visit it before agreeing to put me there? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Jessica handled the arrangements. She said it was highly recommended. Of course, she had. I doubted Michael had any idea of the true nature of the facility or its cost. Did you know it was a locked memory care unit? That it costs over $9,000 a month? That it would have depleted my savings within 2 years? His expression confirmed my suspicion. He hadn't known these details. Jessica said it was a continuing care community with different levels. She said you'd start in independent living and only move to more care if needed. And you believed that without verifying, Thomas interjected, without discussing it with your mother directly, without getting a proper medical evaluation. Michael's shoulders slumped slightly. Jessica said Mom would resist, that all elderly parents fight placement, even when it's necessary. I felt a surge of both pity and anger. My son, now middle-aged but still so easily led, he'd gone from being under my wing to being under Jessica's, never developing the backbone to stand on his own. Michael, I said more firmly, I'm not accepting visitors today. I suggest you go home and really think about what happened yesterday, about the deception, the attempt to institutionalize me without my knowledge, the abandonment at the facility when things didn't go as planned. Then, consider what kind of son participates in such treatment of his mother. When you're ready to have an honest conversation with my attorney present, we can talk. The door closed on Michael's confused face. I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Did I do the right thing? I asked Thomas. Should I have listened to his side? My brother guided me back to the sofa. You'll have time for that later, Maggie. Right now, we need to focus on protecting you legally. Michael needs to understand the seriousness of what happened. This wasn't a miscommunication or a well-intentioned mistake. This was a coordinated attempt to strip you of your autonomy and assets. Marjorie brought me tea, her kindness a balm after Jessica's calculated cruelty. One day at a time, she counseled first security, then healing, then maybe reconciliation, but only if earned. The next week was a whirlwind of protective actions. James filed an elder abuse report with Adult Protective Services, using my documentation and the facility's records as evidence. I signed new legal documents explicitly removing Michael and Jessica from any decision-making roles and clarifying that any changes would require evaluation by 2 independent physicians and court review. Thomas and Marjorie stayed with me, screening calls and visitors. Eleanor organized a rotation of friends to provide additional support, a subtle demonstration to the neighborhood that I was neither isolated nor incapacitated. Dr. Winters referred me to a geriatric psychiatrist who documented my cognitive health and noted signs of situational anxiety and trauma consistent with elder abuse, not dementia. 10 days after the incident at Evergreen, James received a letter from an attorney representing Michael and Jessica. It painted a very different picture. A concerned son and daughter-in-law trying to help an increasingly confused mother who had fabricated an elaborate persecution narrative due to paranoia. They requested a formal capacity evaluation and temporary guardianship for Margaret's protection. James's response was comprehensive and devastating. My medical records showing perfect cognitive function, bank records demonstrating my financial competence, the facility documentation showing Jessica's misrepresentation, witness statements from the facility staff, police reports, and my detailed log of manipulation tactics. He concluded with a warning that any further false statements about my capacity could result in legal action for defamation and elder abuse. The response from Michael and Jessica's attorney came 3 days later. They were withdrawing their concerns and requested family counseling instead. James advised against immediate participation in joint counseling. This is a classic redirect, he explained. When confronted with evidence of abusive behavior, they're now positioning themselves as simply concerned family members who want reconciliation. That may be genuine, or it may be a tactic to regain access. Either way, individual counseling should come first, and any family sessions should occur with professional support specifically trained in elder abuse dynamics. I agreed, feeling both relieved that the immediate threat had receded and heartbroken that my relationship with my only child had come to this. I began seeing Dr. Lydia Chen, a therapist specializing in elder trauma. She helped me process the complicated emotions, betrayal, grief, confusion, anger, and lingering love. For my son, despite everything, what you're experiencing is ambiguous loss, she explained during one session. Michael is physically alive but emotionally unavailable to you, as the son you knew. Jessica's influence has created a situation where you've lost him in many ways, yet hope remains for potential reconciliation. That tension is incredibly painful. She taught me techniques for managing the anxiety that now surfaced at unexpected moments, when the phone rang, when a car resembling Jessica's drove past my house, when I found myself double-checking that I'd turned off the stove, proving to an invisible accuser that I was competent. Throughout this period, I leaned heavily on my support network. Thomas and Marjorie extended their stay to 3 weeks, helping me install security cameras and a new alarm system. Eleanor and my other friends maintained their protective rotation, accompanying me to appointments and activities. My neighbor Barbara, horrified by how Jessica had manipulated her, became particularly vigilant, texting me whenever unfamiliar cars lingered near our homes. The library where I volunteered twice weekly welcomed me back warmly, the head librarian Marion making a point to publicly praise my meticulous organization skills within earshot of several patrons. These small acts of community validation helped restore my confidence, which had been so carefully undermined over the preceding months. 6 weeks after the Evergreen incident, Michael requested a meeting through James, alone, without Jessica. After consulting with Dr. Chen, I agreed, with conditions the meeting would take place at James's office with him present, and Thomas would accompany me. Michael accepted these terms, seeing my son walk into the conference room, looking thinner, with new lines around his eyes, stirred complicated emotions. He sat across from me, hands fidgeting with a pen. "Mom," he began, his voice unsteady. "I owe you an apology. What happened at Evergreen? I didn't understand what Jessica had arranged. I thought it was an evaluation center, not a permanent placement. When I found out what really happened, what she told you versus what she told me, we've been having serious problems." I maintained a neutral expression, years of teaching third graders having taught me not to react too quickly to convenient confessions. "What exactly did Jessica tell you about that day, Michael?" He looked down at his hands. "She said you had agreed to an evaluation at a senior wellness center, that you understood it might involve an overnight stay for comprehensive testing. She said you got confused upon arrival and became combative with the staff. She said they refused to admit you because of your behavior, and that you'd called Uncle Thomas to create drama." James interjected, "And you believed this characterization of events without speaking to your mother directly." Michael winced. "Jessica said her friend at the facility called her, that Mom was telling wild stories about being tricked. She said it was exactly the kind of paranoid thinking the doctor had warned us about." "What doctor, Michael?" I asked quietly. "I've seen only Dr. Winters in the past year, and he has documented that I have no cognitive impairment." Michael looked genuinely confused. "Dr. Reynolds. Jessica arranged a consultation about your symptoms a few months ago. He reviewed your case and suggested you might need memory care soon." James made a note. "There is no record of any Dr. Reynolds evaluating Mrs. Anderson. If medical information was shared without her consent, that constitutes a HIPAA violation." Michael's face paled. He never actually met with Mom. Jessica said he reviewed her documentation and some medical records she had access to as Mom's caretaker. The pieces were falling into place. Jessica fabricating evidence, creating a fictional medical opinion, manipulating Michael with the authority of an invented expert. I felt a surge of pity for my son, even through my anger. "Michael, do you understand now what was happening? Jessica was systematically building a case to have me declared incompetent. She moved my belongings to confuse me, isolated me from you, created false evidence of decline, and attempted to place me in a memory care facility that would have depleted my savings within 2 years. Who would have controlled my assets then? The implication hung in the air. Michael looked physically ill. We've separated, he said finally. After I learned what really happened at Evergreen, I started finding other things. Documentation I supposedly signed but don't remember. Conversations with facility staff that she claimed I participated in. Financial documents about Mom's assets that she'd been compiling. For the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to hope that my son might not have been an active conspirator. Misled, yes, negligent in his duty to protect me, certainly, but perhaps not deliberately attempting to rob me of my autonomy and assets. I need you to understand something, Michael, I said firmly. What happened wasn't a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, it was elder abuse. Whether you were a knowing participant or Jessica's dupe doesn't change the harm that was done to me. I've spent the past 6 weeks afraid in my own home, doubting my own mind because of the gaslighting, rebuilding the security that was shattered. I can't simply pretend none of this happened because you've now separated from Jessica. Michael nodded, tears in his eyes. I know, Mom. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I never intended. He trailed off. I failed you. I should have seen what was happening. I should have talked to you directly instead of letting Jessica filter everything. I should have visited you alone instead of always with her. I should have questioned why she was so focused on your finances, your house. James suggested perhaps individual counseling would be appropriate before any further family discussions. Michael agreed readily. I've already started seeing someone. They're helping me recognize the patterns in my relationship with Jessica. How she isolated me from friends and family, just like she tried to do with Mom. How I'd learned to accept her version of reality without question. As the meeting concluded, Michael asked hesitantly, "Can I call you sometimes, Mom, just to check in?" I understand if you're not ready. I considered his request, measuring my own readiness against the protective boundaries my support network had helped me establish. Not yet, I answered honestly. I'm still processing everything that happened. But you can email me, and we can reassess in a few weeks. He nodded, accepting this limitation without argument, a small but significant sign that perhaps he was beginning to understand the gravity of what had occurred. As we prepared to leave, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This belongs to you," he said, placing it on the table. Inside was the diamond tennis bracelet I'd given Jessica, the one she'd been wearing at Evergreen. I found the receipt in her desk. "I never knew it came from you." In the months that followed, I rebuilt my sense of security through concrete actions. I sold the house on Maple Street, not because I couldn't manage it, but because I chose a fresh start in a vibrant senior community closer to Thomas and Marjorie. The new condo, which I purchased outright for $285,000, offered independence with built-in social connections and activities. I established a trust with James's help, ensuring my assets would be protected and managed according to my wishes, regardless of future health changes. I continued therapy with Dr. Chen, working through the trauma of betrayal and developing stronger boundaries. And I maintained my volunteer work, finding purpose in helping elementary school children improve their reading skills to afternoons each week. Michael and I began a careful reconciliation process, starting with supervised visits and eventually progressing to regular Sunday dinners at my new home. He filed for divorce from Jessica, a process complicated by her counterclaims and financial entanglements. During one particularly honest conversation, he admitted, "I think I always knew something wasn't right about how Jessica approached your care, but it was easier to believe her than to face the possibility that my wife was trying to take advantage of my mother. I'm not proud of that choice." His accountability, while belated, helped heal some of the deepest wounds between us. I didn't fully trust him yet, but I could see him working to earn back that trust, one interaction at a time. Jessica faced consequences for her actions. The elder abuse report resulted in an investigation that uncovered similar attempts with her own grandmother years earlier. While criminal charges weren't filed due to insufficient evidence of completed financial exploitation, the investigation created a record that would follow her. The licensing board for her real estate practice issued a formal reprimand after reviewing evidence of her unethical behavior, placing her on probation for 2 years. Most significantly, perhaps, she lost the social standing she'd so carefully cultivated, as friends and colleagues learned of her actions through the divorce proceedings and community networks. My experience transformed me in unexpected ways. At 69, I became an advocate for elder rights, speaking at senior centers about recognizing the warning signs of exploitation. I joined a peer support group for survivors of elder abuse, finding solidarity and understanding among others who'd experienced similar betrayals from family members. One woman, Shirley, had been locked out of her home by her grandson, who then sold her possessions claiming she had died. Another, Gerald, discovered his daughter had been writing checks to herself from his account for years while claiming to manage his finances. Our shared stories reinforced that elder abuse crosses all socioeconomic and educational boundaries, and that recovery is possible with proper support. Today, as I approach my 70th birthday, I reflect on the lessons of that harrowing experience. I learned that documentation is power. My hidden notebook provided crucial evidence when it was my word against Jessica's. I learned that isolation is a red flag. Genuine caregivers encourage social connections rather than restricting them. I learned that rushing significant decisions about living arrangements or legal matters often serves someone else's agenda, not the elder's well-being. Most importantly, I learned that speaking up, however difficult, is essential. Had I not challenged Jessica at Evergreen that day, had I not called Thomas from my purse, had I not questioned the narrative being constructed around me, I might be writing this from a very different place. A room in a memory care facility, my home sold, my savings depleted, my autonomy lost. If you're listening to my story and recognizing similar patterns in your life or the life of someone you love, please know that help is available. Adult Protective Services exists in every state. Elder law attorneys specialize in protecting seniors from exploitation. Senior centers and community organizations offer resources and support. Don't wait until a crisis like my appointment at Evergreen forces action. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Document concerning behaviors with dates and specific details. Maintain connections with friends and family members who aren't controlled by the person you're concerned about. And remember that age alone never justifies removing someone's right to make their own decisions. I still have my moments of hypervigilance, checking and rechecking that I've turned off appliances, documenting conversations out of habit, feeling a flutter of anxiety when the phone rings unexpectedly, but those moments are fewer now, overshadowed by the joy I've reclaimed in my daily life. I tend a small garden on my condo patio, host book club meetings in my living room, FaceTime with Thomas and Marjorie every Sunday evening, and yes, cautiously rebuild my relationship with Michael one careful step at a time. The scent of blueberry muffins no longer triggers painful memories of that April morning. I've reclaimed my signature recipe, often baking a batch to share with neighbors. Some wounds heal completely, while others leave scars that remind us of our resilience. I choose to focus on the latter. So, if you're wondering what you would do in my situation, I hope you never have to find out. But if you do, remember my story. Remember that Margaret Anderson, at 68, faced down an attempt to erase her autonomy, and not only survived but emerged stronger. Remember that age is not synonymous with vulnerability, that documentation is protection, and that speaking truth to power is sometimes as simple and as difficult as saying no, this is not what I agreed to. If my experience helps even one person recognize and escape a similar situation, then every difficult moment was worth it. Thank you for listening. And if you're watching this from your own kitchen, your own living room, your own sanctuary, cherish it, protect it, and never let anyone convince you that independence is something you should surrender without very good reason.